In 1925, I went into Oklahoma looking for snake lore, and came out with a fear of snakes that will last me the rest of my life. I admit that it is foolish, since there are natural explanations to everything I saw and heard, but it masters me nonetheless. If the old story had been all there was to it, I would not have been so badly shaken. My work as an American Indian ethnologist had hardened me to all kinds of extravagant legendry. And I know that simple white people can beat the Redskins at their own game when it comes to fanciful invention. I called at the asylum because a few of the oldest settlers told me I would find something important there. Neither Indians nor white men would discuss the snake god legends I had come to trace. Not more than 6 or 7 people mentioned the asylum, and those who did were careful to talk in whispers. But the whispers told me that Dr. McNeil could show me a very terrible relic and tell me all I wanted to know. Dr. McNeil apparently could explain why Yig, the legendary half-human father of serpents, is a shunned and feared character in that area of the country. I had spent many years collecting data on the evolution of snake worship among the Indians. My series of research had stretched from Guatemala to the Oklahoma plains, but were still incomplete. Dr. McNeil?
So you've been studying the Yig legend. I know that many of our Oklahoma ethnologists have tried to connect it with Quetzalcoatl, but I don't think any of them have traced the intermediate steps quite so well. You've done remarkable work. For a woman, as young as you seem to be, you certainly deserve all the data we can give. I don't suppose old Major Moore or any of the others told you what it is I have here.
No.
No. They don't like to talk about it. And neither do I. It is very tragic and quite horrible. But that is all. I refuse to consider it anything supernatural. There's a story that I'll tell you after you see it. To come to the point, the thing we have here is what you might call a victim of Yig's curse. A physically living victim. We don't let the bulk of the nurses see it, although most of them know it's here.
Doctor, if you've...
There's just 2 steady old chaps who I let feed it and clean out its quarters. Used to be 3. Good old Stevens passed on a few years ago. Suppose I'll have to break in a new group pretty soon.
Doctor, I don't understand.
The thing doesn't seem to age or change much. And we old boys can't last forever. Maybe the ethics of the near future will allow us to give it a merciful release. But it's hard to tell. Did you see that basement window over on the east wing? That's where it is. You needn't make any comment. Just look through the movable panel on the door and thank God the light isn't any stronger. And then I'll tell you the story, or as much as I've been able to piece together.
object was almost of human size and entirely devoid of clothing. It seemed almost hairless, and its tawny-looking back seemed subtly squamish in the dark light. Around the shoulders, it was rather speckled and brownish, and the head was curiously flat. For God's sake, what is it?
During the early days of the Indian Territory, there was not quite so much secrecy about Yig, the snake god of the Central Plains tribes, primal source of Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan myths. These tribes talked quite freely about their legends and autumn ceremonies, and the lore spread to the surrounding white settlements. The great fear came in the land rush days of '89, when strange incidents had been rumored, and those rumors sustained by hideously tangible proofs. You see, the Indians said the new white men did not know how to get on with Yig. And the new settlers took that theory at face value.
The doctor added again with almost needless emphasis. The only truly authenticated horror had been a thing of pitiful tragedy and not bewitchment.
It began when Walker Davis and his wife Audrey came from Arkansas to settle in the newly opened public lands in the spring of 1889, north of the Wichita River in Caddo County. There's a small town there now where the train stops, but otherwise it's much the same as it was then. Walker and Audrey came from the Ozarks with 2 mules and all their household goods. They were typical hill folk, kind of youngish, perhaps a little more ambitious than most, but they'd had a hard life in Arkansas and looked forward to better returns. In general, there is very little to distinguish the Walkers from the thousands of other settlers who flocked to the region at that time. But one thing made the Walkers different from all those other folks.
That thing was Walker's almost epileptic fear of snakes, which some laid to prenatal causes. But some thought was caused by a dark prophecy about his demise that an old Indian squaw told him to scare him when he was little.
Whatever the cause, the effect was marked indeed. Despite his strong general courage, the very mention of a snake would cause him to grow faint and pale, while the sight of even a tiny specimen would produce a shock bordering on convulsive seizure. In the earlier stages of the journey, there were no Indian snake legends to trouble him. The, transplanted tribes of the Southeast did not share the wilder beliefs of their western neighbors. As fate would have it, it was a white man in Okmulgee who gave the Davises their first hint of Yig beliefs.
Yig is, or he seems to be, an odd half-anthropomorphic devil of arbitrary and capricious nature. He's not really evil. In fact, he's usually quite well disposed to those who show the proper respect to him and his children.
His children?
His serpents. But in autumn, he becomes abnormally ravenous and must be held at bay or driven off by means of suitable rites. And that's why the tom-toms pound ceaselessly week in and week out while the medicine men play on their whistles and their rattles.
Sir, if you don't mind.
Do you know Yig's primary trait is a relentless devotion to his children? You know, snakes. A devotion that is so great that the natives are almost afraid to protect themselves from the venomous rattlesnakes that throng this region. Yig will have vengeance, yes he will, on anyone who flouts him or who dares to wreak havoc with his wriggling progeny. Yeah. Yig will turn a violator after horrendous tortures into a huge spotted snake.
It didn't take long for Walker's fright to cause him to take the most extraordinary precautions at every camp they made. Every clump of bushes and every group of rocks seemed to him a potential hiding place for malevolent serpents, while every human figure he saw in the shadows seemed to him a potential snake god until nearness proved to the contrary. On the 22nd evening of their journey, a savage wind made it imperative to camp in as sheltered a spot as possible. Despite her husband's attitude, Audrey overruled him this once, and they took shelter under a large rocky cliff. God's sake, God. What'd you go for to do that? Ain't you heard all the tales people have been telling? You ought to told me. We'd have moved on. Not just them snakes, but babies. That devil God loves them children more than anything. What do you think the Indians all dance and beat their drums for, huh? This land's under a curse. Everyone says so. Yig rules here, and he comes out. He comes out now to get his victims and turn them into snakes. God knows what you've done to yourself. To us. He'll get you for sure. I'll buy a charm off one of the Indian medicine men. He'll get you, Aud. Sure as there's a God in heaven, he will come out of the night and turn you into one of them. All the rest of the journey, Walker kept up the frightened reproofs and prophecies. They soon met with the first of the real Plains Indians they had seen. The man, who was a leader of a group close behind, talked freely under the spell of whiskey offered to him. The Pawnee man even taught poor Walker a long-winded protective charm against Yig, of course in exchange for a quart bottle of the same inspiring fluid. By the end of the week, they had reached their chosen site. The region was flat and promised great fertility. There also seemed to be very few snakes or possible dens for them, so Audrey persuaded Walker to build their cabin there.
There was no town nearby, despite the railway 30 miles away, so the people of this area became very cohesive and close.
Of all the neighbors, The Davises found Joe and Sally Compton the most helpful and congenial. The two women would visit each other often and talk about past and future gossip.
Oh, I don't blame him about being nervous around snakes. I heard a story about a man from Scott County who was bitten by a whole horde of rattlers all at once. He crawled into his house one night to get warm by the stove. People reckoned those snakes set on him so fast he was dead even before he hit the floor. His body was filled with so much venom that it swelled up. His chest finally burst from all the poison. It looked like he'd been gutted.
Every now and then, Walker rode over and talked long with the old men and shamans about the snake god and its wrath.
He does not forget things. In the autumn, his children are hungry, wild. And Yig is hungry and wild, too. All my people make medicine against Yig when the corn rises. We give him corn, and then we dance in our dress to the whistle and the rattle and the drums. And we keep the drums alive to drive Yig away and to call down the aid of Chiroa, whose children men are, because the snakes are his. It is bad that the squaw of Davis killed the children of Yig. Let Davis say the charms many times during the harvest. Yig is Yig! Yig is a great god!
The drums. Day and night, week on week, they're always going in exhaustless relays. Walker says they protect us.
It's been abnormally warm, but he preys on everyone's nerves.
Halloween's gonna be here soon. You know it's from the harvest. Sam Hain, they call it. Oldest farmin'? Probably older. They say it's been kept around by witches' word of mouth in the woods. Spoken quiet.
Notwithstanding this strain, several festive gatherings were held at one or another cabin after the crops were reaped.
But during the reaping, Halloween drew near. This was still the dread witch Sabbath that still hinted at vague terror under its latter-day mask of comedy and spectacle.
I reckon it'd be a shame if we invited all these nice people, and Lafayette played this here fine music, and you didn't get a chance to dance. I seem to recall you're awful fond of dancing.
Yes.
Yeah. I had a great deal of difficulty piecing out all that happened after the guests left. There were times, though, at first, when I was able to make a try at it. Shh. But they had a very familiar feeling. You hear something? Something a buzzing and a rustling.
Walker. Suppose it's the curse.
No, gal. I reckon he don't come like that. He's shaping like a man unless you look at him close. This here's some varmint coming out of the cold. I better stomp him out before it makes much headway or gets at the cupboard.
Walker. Walker. It must be the Curse of Yig. He had sent his monstrous children on All Hallows Night, and they had taken Walker first. Walker. Walker. You're just snakes. Damn snakes. Goddamn snakes. I'm sorry, Walker. It should have been me. Go away! Go away, snake devil! Go away, Yig! I didn't mean to kill him! I was afraid he'd be scared of him! I don't go for to kill your children! Don't come near me! Don't come near me! she live? Was it ever explained?
Yes. She lived. In a way. And it was explained. I told you, no bewitchment, only cruel, pitiful, material horror. Sally Compton came to visit soon after.
Odd. Odd.
And found Walker's body. But the corpse was completely free from any sign of snakebite.
Oh.
So Walker had only fainted.
Yes. And his fear made him fill his wife with wild stories that made her...
So one could say there really was a curse. The snakes had left quite an impression.
She had lucid spells at first, but they got to be fewer and fewer. Her hair came in white, then fell out. Her skin grew blotchy. And when she died...
Died? Then what was that thing downstairs?
That thing in room B116 is what was born to her 3/4 of a year after that Halloween night. There were 3 of them.
2 of them were even worse.
But this is the only one that lived.